Okay, not seeing anybody else who's trying to get in at this moment, so I'm going to kick it off here. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. For those who don't know, my name is Colton Dale. I am second vice president of the Grosse Pointe Democratic Club, and this is our the first of hopefully what's going to be a series of events to provide some educational opportunities to candidates and those who think they might run, whether it's this year or in the future, or really to anybody who wants to be a part of our local effort this year. So again, welcome. I just wanted to go over a few things before I hand it off to our first presenters. So the first thing is really, I kind of already mentioned it, but this event and others are part of a broader strategy that the Grosse Pointe Democratic Club is taking this year to really put a full effort together to first find and then run some great candidates for local office this year, so that we can start hopefully filling some of these council seats and mayoral seats with Democratic and liberal leaning folks. I think everybody knows the Grosse Pointes are historically conservative, but things are changing, and I don't think the councils and mayors quite yet are all on board with that or reflect the community as best they could. So that's a big part of why we are doing what we're doing and putting together this strategy. Also wanted to just mention our endorsement process is part of this grander strategy as well. Myself and Neil and others are on the endorsement committee for the Grosse Pointe Democratic Club, and we will be looking to make some endorsements a little bit later this spring. Happy first day of spring, by the way. I didn't realize that was today. It's shaping up to be a nice day too. But so watch out for more information about the endorsement process. The endorsement process, if you are endorsed, can bring a lot of benefits, especially in these local races. So keep an eye out for that. And then I think it's also being covered later in a presentation, the endorsement process and the endorsement of other some of our partner organizations as well. I do ask everybody to hold the questions until the end. There is a time set aside for question and answer at the end. And then just wanted to show the agenda as well. So this is the agenda. So first, we're going to cover what it's like to be a council member by Grosse Pointe Park Council Member Darcy McConnell and Grosse Pointe Farms Council Member Neil Soroka. Then we will be moving on to filing. What does it take to actually file to run for local office? After that, we will be doing the campaign aspect, running a successful grassroots campaign. And then after that is the Q&A, and then we will close it out from there. So without further ado, I want to pass it on to Councilmember McConnell and Councilmember Soroka, and I will be managing the slides here. So just let me know when you need me to move forward. Okay, guys?
Sure.
Thanks, everybody.
So good morning, everyone. As you mentioned, my name is Darcy McConnell, a member of the Grosse Pointe Park City Council.
And I'm Neil Soroka. I'm a member of the Grosse Pointe Farms City Council.
And so I was appointed to the council in November to fill an open seat. So I've only been on the council a short time, but it's been a very busy time. So just if you want to go to the next slide, talk about what we're going to cover. I think it's important for people to understand the different types of government. We're going to talk about the different duties that we have as council members, meetings, other items that may come with the territory, and things that you may not think come with the territory. So these are the different types of local government. For our purposes, most of the ones that we deal with in our area are council manager. You know, if you think of a strong mayor system, Detroit City Council is an example of that. In our case, we're council manager. As I mentioned, commission, actually the commission members actually have some powers that would mirror like the administration. So.
Yeah, and the same is true in the farms. The farms is also a councilor manager style system. I'm pretty sure all of them in the parks and Harper Woods, or the Pointes and Harper Woods, are council managers.
So what does that mean in terms of council manager? We oversee the general administration, we make policy, and we set the budget. We actually appoint the city manager, a couple other positions that we have say in the city attorney and the city clerk. The mayor functions as a member of council with a little more power, and Neil, you have to chime in. I don't know if it's his name, but he, in this case, the mayor also gets to appoint the commissions and board posts, as well as council committees.
That's a good question, actually. We haven't, so I've been on the Farms Council, like, I think just a year longer than Darcy. So none of us have been there that long. And with COVID, even though I've been on a year, it's very different than a normal year. And I don't know about I think pretty much a rule of the council manager system is that the mayor is always considered a co-equal to the other members of the council. It's actually relatively recent in Grosse Pointe Farms that we elect our mayor. Up until 2003, the mayor was just a position that was voted on by the council in its first meeting together. That's still how we deal with mayor pro tem, which is kind of like, I think of it as the vice mayor, and really only plays a role if the mayor for some reason isn't out of town or isn't available. But the mayor, the other kind of function that the mayor has is, especially in Grosse Pointe Farms, is, and our mayor is Louis Theros. Mayor Theros is really kind of like the representative of the council to the public in most of the front-facing stuff. So when a ribbon needs to be cut, or frankly, if we have a number of issues right now with like signage on Lakeshore and excessive signage, like Louis is the one pounding the pavement and knocking the doors in Lansing trying to get answers. And so really the mayor is an additional set of responsibilities with, I think in the case of Grosse Pointe Farms, our council is paid and the mayor, I think, gets like $25 more a month or something like that.
So on that note, I would love to ask people if they know how much Grosse Pointe Park City Council members get paid. But I think we're on speaker view right now.
Is it a goose egg?
It is a goose egg. This is strictly voluntary. We do not get paid for this position. So
yeah, and in the farms we are paid. I earn $50 a month. So these are
yeah. So if you're doing this,
you're not doing it for the money.
Plant some income. I'd strongly advise against that. So
that said, I will say in the woods they make bank over there. The woods, I think they make like $600 a month. I know, or something like that. They make pretty good money over there. But none of this stuff is, frankly, even if you are getting paid to some, it's a lot more time than you think it is. And even if I were making $600 a month, it would be not. I think sometimes what you put into it.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. In terms of what comes with the job, in terms of your official duties. We talked about this already a little bit, but your job is to pass an ordinance, make sure that you're in compliance with things like the Open Meetings Act, if your city has a code of conduct, and then also just in terms of how the duties are divided. A lot of people think that a council member, whatever the structure is, holds more power than they really do. In this case, the day-to-day operation is really done by the city manager. The council does oversee the budget, so we can shape that. And we'll talk about committees in a few. Anything you want to add on that, Neil?
I was going to say, the important thing to remember is that all of this, even though Councilmember McConnell is right, this manager is in charge, runs the day-to-day. The important thing to remember in all of this is like, when you're elected to council, you're representing citizens, and citizens are always in charge. They're always at the top of the food chain. And where the big point is while the city manager manages everything, the council holds the hiring and firing responsibility of the city manager. And so the relationship is, it's a really interesting one between the city manager and the council, because the city manager holds almost all of the kind of responsibility day to day. And it's like being a very hands-off manager of a business. you could always come in and theoretically, fire the manager of your bar or restaurant. But if you're a hands-off manager, you only want to do that in really dire circumstances. And it's probably not to your best interest a lot of the time.
So just in terms of following up on what you said about residents, regardless of who has the authority, that doesn't mean that residents aren't going to come to you with concerns that they have. And it's still your job as a council person to react to those, right? To raise those issues with the administration, do what you can to try to get those concerns addressed, or at least steer them to someone who can help them. We mentioned the budget. I'm sorry, go ahead, Neil.
No, I was just saying, that's a huge part of this job is actually, especially given the kind of council manager setup, is really, I think of that as probably one of our top responsibilities, is just be the voice of residents in the town to the bureaucracy that runs the town. So I would say most of my time as a council person and the kind of work that I do as a city council person is actually taking in feedback from people, sharing it with the city management, and making sure that the right people are connected to when somebody has an issue about something. And frankly, a big part of this job is using your ears and listening to. Most of the time, there isn't something we can do right away about an issue, but there is. Our job is to use our ears and keep issues in our memory. So when a budget issue comes up, when, for instance, in the farms, a lot of people are upset that the quality of our sidewalks aren't as good. And so we have a budget discussion about roads. I have a responsibility oh yeah, people are talking about that. Hey, when we talk about roads, are we also going to be redoing our sidewalks as a part of that construction question? And the city manager's responsibility is to hear what I'm conduiting from voters. And to be fair, he's hearing from voters as well, and take action and be responsive to that. So.
Absolutely. So after the last election cycle, there were people we have a sign ordinance that's been on the book since 1950. And it actually says that you can only have 2 political signs up, and they can only be up for 2 days after the election. So someone called in some complaints, some no letters were distributed, no citations were issued, but it raised a very real issue. So the sign ordinance is under review. And then separately, I had some dialogue with some realtors who were concerned about the sign issue. So, all of those issues were informed by constituents. And so that the ordinance is under review right now by the city attorney. So not as impactful as maybe sidewalk repair, but it's just to give you a real life example. And so this is the other thing that, in terms of, you were mentioning earlier, the council meets monthly, and that is a part of your duty. It's not just that they're meeting, you have to do preparation. You'll get the agenda, you'll get, all the information of stuff that you may have to actually take action on. You'll get updates from the city manager about things that are happening. This is your chance also to raise issues that you've heard from your constituents. Do you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, fun fact about you get a council packet every, which usually has the agenda for the meeting and all the kind of necessary requirements. By the way, everyone should know that you have access as a citizen to that council packet. You might not get a physical one, but you can see it. In the case of the farms, it's on our website before the meeting, a week before the meeting. And I don't know, Darcy, if you had this experience, but I did not know this was the case. In the farms, you're sworn in the next meeting after the election, which in our case was the very next Monday. And the Friday before that meeting, all of a sudden a police officer comes to my door, and I was like, wait, what the heck did I do? How did I get in trouble? And that's how they deliver the council packet. So, which is an efficient way to do it. They have cars and are moving around all the time anyways, but that was a surprising moment as a council person.
Yeah, I actually had a private over the phone swearing in. We had a public ceremony, but yeah, that was also new to me. So
yeah, did not expect that.
So I will say too that my first council. So when I interviewed for the position, I complimented the council on how collegial they were, and then I didn't realize that there were some, there were some divisions there. So my first council meeting actually lasted 6 hours. And that was just the council meeting. In addition to the council meeting itself, the preparation you have to do ahead of the meeting, we have a number of different committees and commissions. So in our case, and I apologize, I'm going to rattle these off. We have the Downtown Development Authority, the Tax Increment Financing Authority, the Recreation Commission, and the Planning Commission. The mayor appoints those positions with council approval. And then the council members themselves serve on committees. So we have the sustainability, communication, public safety, public service, beautification, diversity and inclusion, which is one that was added this year by my colleague. And then I have an initiative that I started. So if you consider the meeting, the prep, plus your committee meetings, plus you likely will want to sit in on some of those other meetings, it is a very serious time commitment.
And I would say in the farms, every community is going to be a little bit different. I think we're a little bit physically smaller, and we don't have nearly as many governing authorities. So we don't have quite as many meetings as Darcy was sharing there. And we also have committees, but I mean, frankly, they're not as, the two committees that meet regularly are Parks and Harbor, which supervises Pier Parks and is also very active. But the main subcommittee that's really, or committee that's really active is the Finance Committee, which is the one that prepares the budget and presents it to the rest of the council. There are other committees that I'm on, like Public Safety, and the Communications Committee is a little bit more active, but like a lot of other committees, we don't meet that often because, frankly, we're not dealing with pending ordinance changes or stuff that maybe need to be considered as a part of the committee process. We kind of, in the farms, use committees to deal with kind of issues as they come. And so it's not as if we have like standing committee meetings necessarily.
The funny thing is my first council meeting was not until December, but there was so much activity in November that I felt like I've been on council for a few months. So yeah, we do have a lot of meetings.
The park is in a special place at the moment. I'm sure the farms will end up in there at some point.
So what are council meetings like? Well, there's the formal process where, we adhere to Robert's Rules of Order in terms of taking action on items that come before us. At our last meeting, I think we voted on and passed 3 ordinances. We have 2 opportunities for the public to comment. One is for items that are on the agenda. The other time is for items that are not on the agenda. Our last council, we were moving in the right direction in terms of less time, but our last council meeting actually lasted 5 hours because we had about 2 hours of public comment. So obviously there's been some tough times in the park as it relates to race relations. So it was a pretty intense meeting. Do you want to talk about the meeting?
No, that's similar, very similar.
Okay. And then we kind of already covered the time. And then just in terms of the local policymaking process, a lot of times it's sort of the administration proposes, council disposes, but there's nothing to preclude you from a council member from identifying an issue, raising an issue, either through your committee or through your own conversation with constituents that you think requires some change or some overhaul. So
yeah. I mean, the only thing I'd add to that, and Darcy maybe has experienced some of this as well, is like, I'm a council. We have a very nice council, a lot of like a very collegial relationships with all the members of my council, but also like as a progressive getting like elected to the council, like there's really only me. And so the one thing like worth noting is anytime I want to do something that like maybe our constituents or community members like raise, I have to kind of work for the support of other council members that maybe I haven't worked with for a long time or don't necessarily maybe come from a conservative perspective. And so in terms of policy making, what that means is that oftentimes a lot of work has to be done in my case and kind of bringing people to my side and thinking about ways to work for, to find points of compromise. So, for instance, there's been a long desire among progressives in the Points during Pride Month to fly the Pride flag at City Hall. And that's for a variety of reasons, which frankly I disagree with, that's a contentious issue. And as a vote of one, and I might get possibly one or two other votes, that's not enough to win a council vote. And so oftentimes there's a question of like, is getting that vote worth it, or versus can I get some other stuff? So in the case of last year during Pride Month, I got for the very first time, like the city of Grosse Pointe Farms recognized Pride Month formally with a resolution recognizing it that we could, share with community members. And so the one thing to note is like change. My experience in city council is most of the time you're not dealing with heady, weighty issues of like moral conscience. More often than not, the role that we're playing is like adding a different perspective and bringing new ideas to the table. If you're coming in this because you want to crusade for social justice, great, because that should be a part of our job. But you should also know that that's not the only part of this job too. There's a lot of times where we have to think about whole other parts of the work that a city does and ask questions in a different way to bring in the voices of different parts of the community.
So just to add to that real quickly, yes, there is a whole other aspect to this. I used to cover City Hall as a reporter, and I remember making a wager with the guy who was the mayor's liaison at City Council about how a vote was going to turn out, because I had a better count of the votes than he did. So that is a critical piece of this. If you do have something that you want to get through, it's better to understand who's on your side so that you don't get to the table and get embarrassed and can't get your issue moved.
Yeah, you gotta be able to count the votes, and sometimes it's important to recognize sometimes losing a vote is okay. And it's part of, there's reasons to lose a vote, to maybe put your stake in the ground. Just for example, just this past month, there's now a little bit of controversy about it. The Grosse Pointe Farms approved a construction of a nearly $250,000 gazebo at Pier Park.
Right.
I did not win that vote, but I voted against it. And I knew I wasn't going to win it. But the point is I knew that people, when they heard about the cost of that, were not going to be happy. And frankly, I think there are better ways that we could spend our money.
Sure.
So I knew I was going to lose it, but I also wanted to make a point to say, like, at least there was somebody disagreeing with how we're spending the resources. And the only other thing I'll add is, it's just, you have to be comfortable at times, like standing alone and taking a position. But the important thing about that, especially if you're adding a new voice to a council, is that, if you want to, you got to plan ahead and figure out, is this the issue that I want to like go to the wall on, versus sure, am I trying to build power for something else later on that allows me to kind of achieve some other goals and priorities. The thing I was going to say was, what I did not anticipate as part of being a city council was how much time was spent thinking about aesthetics. How something looks and how people feel about how something looks. It's there's a lot of that is a part of the role, at least in these communities. That's a big issue, sure, and something that I have that I have to think about a lot. It's like, are the neighbors going to like to look at it? Would I like to look at this all the time if it were like this? And the other thing is, I don't know about Darcy if the park is the same way, but in Grosse Pointe Farms, the council is also the zoning board.
Yes, we are the same way.
Okay, so, or the zoning board of appeals rather. And so we handle, anytime there's somebody wants to build something, that's actually a lot of our time on council is looking at specs for buildings that want to go up and asking questions as constituents or as people living in the town about that building. And is that not just safe and all these other questions, but like really what people are asking for at that point are exceptions to the rules, and are we okay with those exceptions and what the implications of those exceptions are? Sure.
I think we had one over a fence, one over a generator at our last Board of Zoning Appeals. So I'm going to try and move quickly.
Sorry,
because as I talk about this, there are other things that come with the territory that may not be directly related to what you do. In this case, it likely will, but I have to be at another event at 11. So, so that's okay. So here's some unofficial duties that I think would be good to sort of guide you. It'd be good to go in with a vision for yourself and what you want to accomplish on council. It really helps inform your approach. I think you do, and some may disagree with this, but I think you have an opportunity and should use the bully pulpit. You are a public official when you serve, so it's an opportunity for you to raise awareness with issues, advocate on some issues. And as Neil pointed out earlier, or Councilman Soroka pointed out earlier, you are representing your city, and that is a really critical piece to guide you in terms of your day-to-day, your social media, whatever it is. If you're the face of the city, then you have to view things from that prism and not just your sort of narrow universe. I don't know if you want to chime in, Neil.
No, go ahead.
Okay. And then you can influence the process. Again, the city manager, for example, right now, when I first got on the council, the public safety director announced that he was taking the job as a city manager in the Shores, which left an opening in the public safety department. Several council members advocated for a search process successfully, and then I advocated successfully for a partnership between the city and the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement. And obviously, as you probably heard recently, historically, there's been issues with a lack of diversity in the department. So I'm very proud of that advocacy because it did help influence the process. We have that voice at the table, but it also helped in terms of how we were able to get people to apply for the position. So I think, you can be mindful that even if you don't make the final decision, that you do have the capacity to shape things that are done. And as we mentioned earlier, it is really critical to really respond. Lately we've been getting a lot of emails about the dog park. I hate to even bring up the word dog park, but it's true. And of course, we got a lot of emails as it relates to this issue with the public safety director. So, and then you also may get speaking requests. People want to hear from you. They want to understand how it's going on, or to give you some input about concerns that they have. So that may not be an official duty. I do virtual coffee hours once a month. As the world opens up, hopefully we can start to do some things in person.
You have time for your last slide here, Darcy?
It is, yes. So, yes, it's 11 on the button. So again, it's also good to know what your colleagues care about. So that's a way, sort of that sort of trade-off there. Again, it's good to always inform people about what you're doing, why you're doing it. We've been, a number of residents have been advocating for some time about more transparency from the city. So it's sort of a collaborative process with council and residents to work toward that. And I mentioned community visibility. And again, I can't stress enough that all of this doesn't matter if you don't know why you want to be here, right? You should understand going in, why do you want to serve on council? What's your why? So my why is not profound. It's just that I really like helping people. and that's kind of who I have been most of my life. And this allows me to do that. I also have an affinity for government and good government. So.
And in my case, the why was I wanted to bring a different perspective to the council. I was the youngest person by about, I think 20 years on city council when elected. And that just means that certain views weren't being presented in the council. And what's helpful when you have your why is it allows you to okay, what questions should I be asking here? What is my responsibility to do? And I think that's a really important thing to do sometimes.
And I guess this is what in journalism where they call it bearing the lead. I should acknowledge that I was the first African-American on the Grosse Pointe Park City Council. So.
Indeed.
Well, thank you both. That was fantastic. Darcy, I know you got to get out of here, so I'll let you scoot out. But thank you both again for that portion of the presentation. Lots of good information in there.
No problem. Thanks for having me. And I'll put my email in the chat in case people have questions for later. Okay, so next, our next segment is filing to run for local office. This is segment 2 out of 3. This is going to be with Grosse Pointe Farms Council Member Neil Soroka, joined by Grosse Pointe Park Council Member Ame Fluet.
So, all right. So take it away, guys.
Thank you, Colton. So we did this presentation a little bit differently. I'm actually going to speak to the first half, and then Neil will speak to the second half. And of course, he's welcome to jump in anytime. But
And likewise.
My name is Ame Fluitt. I am a council member in Grosse Pointe Park. I have been on council for just a little over a year. I was elected in 2019, which was the same time that Neil was elected. And I didn't put my email address there on the slide, but it's very simple. It's my last name, Fluitt, my first initial A, at grossepointepark.org. fluitta@grossepointepark.org, because I'm truly happy to answer questions. Thank you to the Grosse Pointe Democratic Club for hosting this today, and thank you for inviting me to speak. And thank you to the people who are attending who have either decided to run or are considering running. I think that's huge. It's an admirable goal. I enjoy being on council about 80% of the time. And as Darcy and Neil already talked about, it is a much bigger time commitment than you probably realize, but it's also very rewarding. It can be very frustrating, but most of the time it feels great when you have a resident come to you with an issue, whether it's something big or small, and you're able to give them the answer that they're looking for or help them figure out how to solve their problem. It is very rewarding. So I applaud anybody who's thinking about doing it, and please feel free to reach out to me later on if you do have questions. So as Colton said, I'm just going to be speaking about actually what you need to do and all the boxes that you need to check before you can actually get your campaign started. Before you are knocking on doors and putting ads in newspapers and that kind of thing, you have to file to run. So I'm just going to talk about those first steps. Colton, thank you. So most of the time, if your city works the same way that the park does, you're going to be able to go to your city website and get information about the election process. And Colton, can you actually click on that link, and so I can kind of...
Yeah, sure. I've got it up already, I believe. I have to share a different window here.
So if you can scroll down a little bit. So this is what it looks like. Thank you. This is what it looks like on the Grosse Pointe Park website. And you can see there's past election information, but right there, the highlighted section, it shows that your nominating petitions have to be filed by 4 p.m. on April 20th. So that is not just in the park. That's the election deadline for this year. And all of your city clerks hopefully have this information on the city web pages. That will also be where, when the election is over, you'll be able to see the final results and other information like that. Can we go back to the...
Yep, I will switch back.
Thanks. So what you're probably going to do first is, once you've decided to run, you're going to go down to the clerk's office and they're going to give you your filing petitions. And there was a little bit of discussion this year about how many signatures were going to be needed. Every city is different. And if you want to look at your city charter, that's where you can find information about how many signatures that you need. Obviously, the clerk is going to have that information as well. In the park, it's between 25 and 50 signatures, which is fairly easy to get. Collecting signatures actually takes a little more time than you probably think, because even if you're going to your friends and people that you know well, they never want to just sign the petition. They want to discuss your campaign. And that's great, because this is how you're kicking off your campaign. This is the first campaigning that you're actually going to be doing, is talking to the people that you know, the people that you already know are going to support you, the people who are happy to sign your petition. That's going to be the start of your campaign, is talking to those people, telling them what your stance is going to be, and then hopefully they're going to go out and talk to other people about you as well. Now, the county had some updated requirements for signatures this year, and for a few minutes we thought we might actually require more signatures than we had in the past. but the city charter actually supersedes any requirements that, any changes that were made by the state or the county. So that our city attorney advised us that because the way that the change was written, which deferred to the city charter, that we would still be using the signature requirements that we had had in the past. So as I said, in the park, it's 25 to 50. It's different from city to city, but that's the first thing that you want to make sure you're knowledgeable about, because you have to get all those signatures in on time.
And in the farms, it's 50, but not more than 75. So you have to have at least 50. But if you have 76, I don't know what happens if you have that 76th. The important thing about petitions is, are you going to talk about that, Ame? Like the rules with petitions?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. What I'm going to say overall is just always make sure that you're reading everything that you're given. I'm a big believer in that, whether it's your petition or the schedule of reporting requirements that you have to do later on for campaign finance, or your city charter, or the agenda that you're going to be getting every month as a city council person. You have to read everything. Most of the time the information is there. You just need to read that fine print and make sure that you're paying attention. So when you get those filing petitions, on that petition itself, it tells you, you can't date it until, or you can't sign it until all the other signatures have been filled in. The information at the top that indicates what office you're running for and your name and all of that basic information, that needs to be filled in before people can start signing it. Everybody who signs it has to be a registered voter in your city. And when you turn that petition into the clerk will check all of those people's signature blocks and to make sure that they're registered voters. And if some of those people are well-meaning, but you don't ask them if they're a registered voter and it turns out that they're not, or for whatever reason they're not eligible, or they filled out their signature line incorrectly, the clerk can throw that signature out. So that's one of the reasons you have in the park from 25 to 50, because you probably want to go over that requirement of 25 in case the clerk winds up having to remove some of those signatures. All those rules are right there on the petition. If you read them carefully, that information is laid out for you. So just make sure you're paying attention to what those requirements are.
Ame, one thing I'll just add for a quick second, because this has come up recently here in the farms, is it's actually very important that you get the petition pages from your clerk. You cannot just like, and this seems a little confusing. Like, why couldn't you just show up with a list of like, here are the people that have signed? You have to use in the farms, and I think this is the case in a lot of municipalities. Like, when you say you want to run for office, you go to the clerk, and they give you petition pages, more than enough, more than you'll need, including like extras, so you don't have to worry if you ruin them. But and you have to use those pages. If you get it from another municipality, or maybe you find some blank like official Michigan petition forms, it won't count. It needs to be that official form in order for it to count, and you need to like have a conversation with the clerk in order to get them. So that's something that I wasn't aware of when I first ran, and is very particular. And the important thing to note is you want to make sure all the information is right, because theoretically, if anything is wrong on that page of signatures, the whole there are points on the petition page that you have to like sign and make sure that the person collecting the signatures appropriately signs and dates. And if that's off, then all of the signatures on that page are null. So again, Ame's 100% right. Follow the rules on the petition form very carefully. We haven't had issues of people. In our case, I know one of the city council members is well familiar with city government and actually picked up petition signatures from another community that he works in, got a bunch of signatures, and the clerk said, you can't use those petition signatures because they're not on our official petition form.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
So that brings us to the next point, which is where strategy starts to play into your campaign. I would say you want to file your petitions a little bit early in case there is an issue with your signature forms, or some of them get thrown out. When I filed, I think I filed the day before the deadline, and I immediately started stressing about it, that something was going to be wrong with my petition, even though I knew there was nothing wrong with it. But you start second guessing yourself, and everything turned out to be fine. But that's a strategic process. Do you want to wait and file at the last minute and assume all your signatures are going to be acceptable, or do you want to file early? And the thing to think about is, if you're in a contentious race and you file early, then that information gets out that you've filed and other people have filed, and then that might influence other people who maybe were not sure if they wanted to run or not. That could influence them to run against you. Or if it does become a political thing, even though these are all nonpartisan races, you might wind up with some people saying, we have 3 people running that we don't like. We need to hurry up and get some challengers in there. So deciding when to file is a little bit of a strategic process. Once you turn that information in, I was very happy to see that for the next steps, the clerk and the county kind of hold your hand. So when you turn in your petitions, I know our clerk called me and said, you have enough signatures, everything looks fine, you're officially filed to run, which I appreciated. And then the clerk actually files those petitions with the county on your behalf, which is very helpful. Within 24 hours, maybe less, I had received an email from the county letting me know that those petitions had been filed and that I was accepted as a candidate. So it's very helpful. It's very quick. They let you know that it's done, and then you're on to your next steps, which is the next slide. So when the county reaches out to you and says, we've received your petitions, you've officially filed, what they're going to ask you to do next is fill out a statement of organization. And this is basically a one-page form. It takes about 2 minutes to fill out. It's not difficult at all. And you scan it and you send it back to the county. And at that point, you've really done everything that you have to do until you start campaigning. And you don't even have to start reporting financial contributions for quite a while. So once you get that statement of organization filed, you have a little bit of a break. So here's what you need to think about when you file that statement of organization. It's going to ask you for the name of your campaign committee. Now, this sounds very official, but for most candidates, I would venture to say the committee is basically you. I know that was the case in my race. A lot of people will have someone help them with their financial stuff. And if you want to, you can call that person your treasurer. That's the only name that you actually need to add to that statement of organization, is if someone else is going to be the treasurer. But organizing the committee is really as easy as just deciding what to call it. So for instance, mine was, the committee to elect Ame Fluid. It's pretty simple and pretty straightforward. Now, the things that you have to decide about are what your email address is going to be. And this is where you decide, I think mine was, I've already forgotten, Fluid for GPP. I don't even remember what my official email address was, but you've got to have a catchy email address, and that's where all of your campaign information is going to come from the county, because they will send you reminders about things. And then obviously that's where people who have questions about your campaign are going to email you. So that has to be a little bit catchy. You have to decide if you're going to put your home address on that form. And I can tell you that you might as well, because people are going to be able to look up your home address regardless. The statement of organization is going to ask for your home address and your official mailing address. I went and got a PO box because my husband and I are very security conscious, and I was making an effort, but ultimately your home address has to be on that statement of organization, and it's publicly available information. So getting a PO box is kind of a waste of time and money.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's weird. Not only does it have to be on that address, but if you put out a sign, for instance, your address has to be on every single sign. It's frankly something that I would like to see changed in Michigan law, but it's Michigan state law.
Well, and that's one thing that was kind of nice is your door hangers, everything, you have to say who paid for them. So because I did have a PO box, I was able to put the PO box on the door hangers and on the signs. But ultimately, yeah, looking up somebody's statement of organization is very easy to find, and then it does come back to your home address. But Neil, that's a good point. If you're going to use only your home address, it's going to have to go on the sign that's in everybody's yard.
Yeah, it's okay. It's really small on all that stuff, and nobody likes that. But I think that's different for me as a white guy too, to say that.
As a what?
I think as like a white guy, I think I feel probably a little more comfortable with it than I think a lot of other people would.
Yes, for sure. You also have to know where your campaign bank account is going to be. It's nice because you don't actually have to have the bank account open yet. You just have to put on the statement of organization the name of the bank and the address of the bank. So for instance, I hadn't even opened my bank account yet. I knew where I was going to go, so I had that information ready. I didn't actually open my bank account until later. And Colton, if you could click on those two links just to show people. The Wayne County Campaign Finance page is, there it is. Not super up to date, but this is basically where you're going to go for all your information. They're going to give you an ID and a log on. This is where you're going to do all your campaign finance filing, which Neil is going to talk about. But this is also where you're going to find your schedule for all of your filing deadlines. And if you look in the little blue box that's right in the middle of the page, in the second, right there, where it says campaign statements filing schedule, that's the thing you're going to need to refer to over and over again.
Yeah.
Is that this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
For some reason, it's not displaying properly, but yeah, I actually have a clip. I have a clip on my part of the presentation with the deadlines for this year.
There we go.
Yeah, you're gonna go back to that over and over again, unless you don't have to report, which is if you raise more than $1,000, which you're probably going to need to do, then you're going to need to report. And I will leave that to Neil. But as I said, that website is where you're going to go for everything. They're good at sending reminder emails. They're not great at responding to emails, but they are very good about answering questions if you call. They do answer the phone. They're very helpful if you need help with something. So with that said, I think I've covered all of my information. Thank you again for attending. Thank you to the Grosse Pointe Democratic Club. And I'm absolutely happy to answer any questions that anybody has. And I will turn it over to Neil.
Great. One thing about the bank account that was setting up the bank account was actually like surprisingly, I did not know when I did it what Ame found out rather, about the fact that you could say and not have to like get your information right away for the bank account. There was a lot of like, I wanted to have fundraising set up right away. So I had to go get the bank account set up, and then you have to set up a bunch of other things to get the fundraising apparatus worked up. That's a separate conversation that is more in depth that we're not going to go to here. But there's lots of like, you have to set up you have to get an IRS number because essentially what you're doing is setting up an organization if you're like a business basically to take in money. So there's lots of kind of rules associated with that. Like Ame said, you want to watch your filing deadlines. April 20th at 4 p.m. is key date. But there's another date that we also have to be really conscious of as well, and that's the withdrawal deadline. In the farms, there's some variations in rules across the state. In the farms, it's 2 days after the initial filing date at 4 p.m. So this year, it'll be 4/22. The withdrawal date is actually really important because especially if you're facing some opposition that wants to kind of figure out how they're going to oppose a person or a set of persons, what can happen is maybe a bunch of people file to run, and then what could happen is various people could withdraw prior to the withdrawal deadline to kind of even out the field, to potentially prevent a primary from happening, or to solidify, in our case, what could very easily happen with an organized conservative group of individuals is you could have maybe 6 conservatives run or file petitions, and then they come together in the 2 days between the deadline and the withdrawal date and figure out who's going to withdraw to solidify support behind the 3 strongest, or whoever they perceive as the strongest candidates. So just be mindful of the withdrawal date, and that's also a date for you to know, just like if you have any last minute concerns and decide, hey, maybe I don't want to do this. You have 2 days to do that after the filing deadline. The important thing to note is once 422 passes, if you have submitted the signatures, you are on the ballot no matter what. If you stop campaigning, if you don't do anything, it does not matter. Your name will still be on the ballot. One of the council members, Ame, is on the council with now, dealt with that last year, last election, when she couldn't remove herself from the ballot and eventually stayed on and actually won her seat. The important thing to note is most of what we're talking about here is geared towards the general election, because primaries historically are a rarity in the points. Primaries only happen in these, it's important to note that the municipal races in the Pointes and Harper Woods are nonpartisan. They're officially called, I think, municipal nonpartisan races. By the way, all nonpartisan means is that you don't have a D or an R or an I or some other green party, for instance, initial next to your name on the ballot. That is all it means. It does not mean that you can't seek the endorsement of the Democratic groups in the area, or you can't be a Democrat or a Republican. It just means that there is no designation on the ballot next to your name. That's all it means. But anyways, primaries are a rarity. They only occur in these nonpartisan municipal races if 2 times the number of seats up for the election file. So in the case of Grosse Pointe Farms, this year we'll have 3 seats that are up for the election. 3 of the 6 council seats, there's a 7th mayor, are up for election. And so a primary would only occur if 7 candidates run or file for election. At which point, in the primary that happens in August, 7 would be on the ballot, and the top 6 vote getters would then go on to the general election. So the person who gets the least votes would be eliminated. And if there were 8 candidates running, the 2 who got the least votes would be eliminated. And just a reminder, primary date is on August 3rd, Tuesday. I'll just note on primaries, again, historically, there haven't been them in the Points. I can't, at least in my going through history, I don't think there has ever been one in Grosse Pointe Farms. I don't know, Ami, if you know any about park history. That said, there's a lot of people who believe that this year the park may for the first time face a primary. So folks should be aware of that. And by the way, the potential existence of primaries is one of the reasons why the filing deadlines for these campaigns are so early, or these elections are so early, and why a lot of people think people just don't run, because you're not thinking in March or April before November about a municipal election, when that's actually when things have to happen. So dollars and cents, campaign finance basics. Again, I want to emphasize these are very basic points. There's a lot more that we can dive into depth on, and when you decide to run for office, for sure, you can. I'm more than happy to have a conversation with anybody about the kind of ins and outs and what I learned about campaign financing. Number one, as Ame went through, make sure to read that Wayne County campaign finance training manual on the Wayne campaign finance site. There's a little PowerPoint presentation that actually is really helpful. It has a lot of information about really kind of, it seems like a weird question, like when do you officially become a candidate? It's actually kind of important for when you have to file certain things, and what counts as a it has all sorts of details. I also found this other site really helpful, related to a whole separate system of tracking MRTS, the Michigan Electronic Reporting and Tracking Systems. I believe this is what state legislators and other people use to track their campaign finance, but it also has a really helpful candidate online candidate manual. It's frankly that I found sometimes a lot easier to find key bits of information, like what's the campaign finance contribution limits, things that I had to kind of be aware of. So definitely look at the MRTS online candidate manual. That's good too. As Ame said, one thing to be very conscious of is the reporting waiver. The reporting waiver, when you file your statement of candidacy, there's a little box that you can check that says, I would like to file for the reporting waiver. I'll just say now, before I even explain it, you want to file for that waiver no matter what, and I'll explain that in a moment. The reporting waiver exempts candidates in / committees who do not anticipate spending / receiving over $1,000 per election from filing campaign statements. So 2 things here. Number one, my interpretation of that is really conservative. Spending and receiving, sending / receiving over $1,000 means that if you give yourself $500 and then you spend that $500, by the way, you've technically hit the limit. Now, some people think the rule is if you give yourself $1,000 and then spend that $1,000, it's not the equivalent of $2,000. But the important thing to note is if you spend more than $1,000, whether you gave it to yourself or raised it and spent it, you're going to break through that reporting waiver. Now, if you know, hey, I'm going to run for election, I'm serious about this, I'm going to spend real money and raise real money to do this, as everyone on this call should, why would I file for a reporting waiver? What I would say is the reason why you do that is because nobody should know about how you plan to run your campaign before you want them to know how you're going to run your campaign. And also plans can change. I think historically in Grosse Pointe Farms, most of the candidates have always filed for the waiver and kept it. The waiver makes your life easier. You do not have to file campaign finance disclosures. You don't have, there's just, it limits the paperwork that you've got to do. In fact, looking through the records in Grosse Pointe Farms, the few times that people have busted through the reporting waiver, historically, they're literally filling out information on paper. They're not even doing it electronically. That's how kind of informal the process is before that point. The one thing I'll note is even if you plan on keeping to that $1,000 limit, let's say you think you can win with only spending $1,000 and you want to save yourself the headache of paperwork, the important thing is make sure you're keeping track of everything. How much you're raising, even in like how much you're giving yourself for your campaign and how much you're spending. Because the point is the reporting waiver is just a waiver for the filing of campaign finance reports. It is not a waiver out of any sort of campaign finance rules at all. You have to keep track because as soon as you spend that $1,001, you have to file. And if you don't have the information that you had before in terms of like where the money was spent, what it was spent on, all that sort of details, you can find yourself in a boatload of trouble and staying up late on filing deadline day, or I think it's at 5 o'clock, so not that late, but being really panicky about whether or not you're going to fill it. As Ame pointed out, in that Wayne County campaign finance area, there is the details on dates. These are the ones you need to be aware of here. The important thing to note is they're subject for the primary and the November election. So August 3rd is the primary. That has rules. If you don't end up not having a primary in your community, the first time you'll ever file any sort of campaign finance documentation is October 17th. If you have a primary, you'll have to do it. You have to file a pre-election report on July 23rd for everything going up until July 18th. That's what those areas are. From the period of July 19th through July 31st, every 48 hours, if you spend or raise money, you have to report that. And then your post-election report is all your spending through August 23rd has to be posted online on September 2nd. For the November election, again, the first time you have to file anything is October 17th, October 22nd for everything through October 17th. 48-hour reports go into effect October 18th or October 30th. And the post-election report is due December 2nd for everything spent between raised and spent prior to November 22nd. The thing I'll say here, just go back for 1 second, Colton, is those deadlines are exactly why I say you should file your waiver no matter what. And the reason why is nobody should know how you plan on running your campaign until you are required to disclose that or you decide to tell them. This was really important in my race. I ran in 2019. I was a challenger against 3 incumbents. I think my opponents were making strategic decisions based on whether or not they thought I was a credible candidate and what kind of race they thought I was going to do. As kind of an outsider, they didn't know what I was planning on doing. And in this case, what I think are weak campaign finance laws here in Michigan, I think, frankly, these should be strengthened, and that if you run a campaign committee, you should be required to be filing quarterly reports every quarter, regardless of where you are in the cycle. I think, frankly, that's the point of campaign finance. The downside of our rules, as you can see, is nobody would know how much I have raised and how much I had spent until October 22nd. For an election that's happening less than 2 weeks before that point. As a candidate, first-time candidate, that dynamic really worked in my favor because I can file the campaign waiver. Everyone thought I was just going to spend or raise $1,000, and in my case, I raised $8,757 for my race, and I ended up spending $8,378 over the course of the race. Nobody anticipated a candidate for city council raising that kind of money or spending that kind of money, and being able to surprise my opponents with the seriousness with which I took the race, I think was a core part of how I was able to kind of win that election. So in this case, the campaign finance rules, frankly, I think they are tilted to overwhelmingly benefit incumbents and people who understand. They're also tilted to benefit people who understand the system and understand strategically how to use that system. So I want to share that with everybody on this call.
Hey, Neil, and one thing, we got to move it along here because we have another segment, and it's I do want to also leave time for questions.
Oh, sorry. Okay. I'll just finish it up. $1,050 is the campaign contribution for things at our level. $2,100 per couple. That's a thing to be aware of. If you have really rich friends, they can give you up to $2,100, but they have to be 2 different checks. Candidates' contributions and the contributions from their spouse are infinite, so you can give as much money as you want to your own campaign. Again, always early money is helpful, and late money is the stuff that comes in afterwards. Your friends always want to give you money right at the end because they get really excited about it. But actually, the truth is, if you want to support somebody for office, the best thing you can do is give them money early. I would highly encourage you to get a treasurer for your campaign. It's important that you trust them because ultimately you're the owner of everything that happens in your campaign. But man, would it have been helpful to have someone like working on the paperwork, minding my P's and Q's and helping me do it. That was definitely a challenge. We talked about the reporting waiver. In terms of expenses, the thing to be aware there is historically yard signs are a candidate's largest expense. But in my election, that was not the case. And I would suspect this year, especially because we're still going to be doing a little bit of socially distanced campaigning. That's not going to be the case. In my race, the number one expense was mail pieces and printing costs for the lit that I was dropping on doors. So I apologize for taking a little extra time. And Ame, I don't know if you had anything to add. I'm sorry, I got a little bit verbose there, but I love talking about the mechanics of campaigns.
Okay. Ame, anything to add before we wrap this up? Hearing none. Okay. Thank you both.
Sorry. Sorry about that. I just stepped away for a second. No, I don't have anything to add, but I will stick around and I can answer questions when we get to that part of the presentation.
Here we go. Okay, take it away, guys.
Hi. So we're gonna speak in the order that you see our names, saving the best two speakers for last. I'm Jeff Greer. I live in Grosse Pointe Park. I'm on the board of the Grosse Pointe Democratic Club, participating in municipal elections this year. And I was the campaign manager for Ame Fluet and Vikas Relin when they were elected in 2019. And I'm pretty proud about the work that we did. But I was really lucky to have two good candidates who knew why they were running. So Colton, can you go ahead? So really what the three of us will cover today is setting up your basic campaign strategy, and that's what I'll talk to. Mary will talk to organization, and Shannon will talk about reaching out to volunteers and keeping people involved. So we've talked a lot about the mechanics of campaigns today, but I think it's really important to understand why you're running. If you don't have a clear idea of why you want to run, the citizens in your area will figure that out and you won't get people's support. I've seen people who should have been good candidates in the past that can't articulate that message, and they end up failing because people see right through them. But you have to know why you're running, and you have to have a purpose. The best way to do that is to get to know the other people involved. Talk to your city manager, talk to your mayor, talk to city council members. If you're thinking about a school board run in the future, be involved in the conversations with parents and PTOs, talk to other board members, and find out why people are involved and attending meetings and paying attention, and what's motivating them to do that, right? The people who are attending council meetings and board meetings, and particularly in the city's commission meetings, are very dedicated. That's a commitment of time. Ask people why they're attending and what they care about. And also look at what's happening in your community. Are there any recent decisions, budget decisions, ordinances the community is discussing? Has there been anything that's been a controversy that people are talking about or concerned about? And then you think about your messaging plan. It always helps to identify 3 to 5 key themes that your campaign is going to be about, and connecting those themes to issues in your community. You should be ready to tell voters who ask why you're the right person to help your community work through these issues. It could be, right, if your community has an issue with like in the Shores, they're having an issue with pensions. And if you're an accountant, right, and creative ways to finance things, that would be a good thing to talk about. But also be ready to explain issues to people in your community. You're going to knock on doors and people aren't going to be following what's going on in their government. Their conversation with you might get them more engaged and get them more involved, but you've got to be ready to explain those issues to them. And then use these themes. Use this idea of why you're the right person to help solve issues, and use that as the foundation of your stump speech. And the stump speech is something that's been in American politics for well over 100 years, right? Every candidate has one. But there's very few occasions where somebody's going to say, hey, Colton, could you show up tomorrow at 2 and read your stump speech? What's more likely to happen is that you're going to be at a campaign event, a fundraiser, a community forum, and people are going to want you to speak about why you're running. And you need to have words prepared, and you need to have thought through it before. Keep it short. You might have 5 minutes to talk. You might have 90 seconds. So be prepared to kind of edit on the spot and selectively present it in a selective fashion. But don't think of your stump speech like a freshman 101 assignment in college, right? Don't think of it as a writing assignment. Think of it as a way of storytelling to connect with your voters. You've got to balance storytelling about your character, the facts in your municipality, and emotion that gets people excited and involved. So just some key things to think about. Talk about who you are. Talk about why you're running for office. Talk about what voters are making a choice about, right? How are you different from the other candidates? Make sure you can articulate that so that the voters know that as well. And then think about what you're asking people to do. Are you asking them to vote? Are you asking them to volunteer for your campaign? Do you want them to donate to your campaign? And then give them specific information. How do you want them to do it? And when do you want them to do it? Do you want them to vote early? Do you want them to vote on election day? Do you want them to donate now? Do you want them to send money through, write a check, send it later, Act Blue, whatever you might use. Okay, Mary?
Hey, good morning, everybody. I want to give you an upfront. Go ahead, Colton, next, please. I may have an issue with internet. If I do, Jeff and Shannon will jump in. Very quickly, the issue for you, if you're thinking about running, is make sure what you're saying on Facebook and other social media is consistent. It's also key to have a backwards plan. Know what some of your key dates are in the campaign and where you need to be by then. For example, if there's a primary, right? And also factor in absentee balloting, because that is becoming increasingly important. And absentee ballots start about 40 days before the regular election day. When you create deadlines, stick to them. Make sure that you're thinking about what your personal calendar looks like in the campaign calendar. You're going to need to be local at critical times, even during the summer. And this is a job on top of your full-time life. But you need to be in it to win it, because people will be counting on you and working hard for you. Next, please. Colton, thanks. Fundraising. Who are some of your primary targets? Do your research. What's been spent locally previously. Some campaigns, I think in the past here in the Points have been run on a fairly narrow budget. I don't think that's going to be the case this year, has been already discussed. Again, do you have a primary? Because if you do, you'll have to build in some extra dollars to do that outreach for the primary. And the old kind of family and friend thing, ask your family and your close friends to ask 10 other people for funds. This has already been covered. You got to know the rules. You got to report it. You have to have clear records. Also critical endorsement processes, even in a nonpartisan race. As I think previously stated, the party will be endorsing locally. I know the Sierra Club does endorsements, and there are other groups that you may want to explore. Go ahead, Colton. Be clear about why you're running. Jeff has already kind of really covered that. When you're looking at getting your message out, there's a variety of ways to do it. Some are more expensive than others. So you need to kind of make an assessment. I would argue upfront, but maybe as the campaign rolls out too. Where are you going to spend your money? Because direct mail is probably going to be very important in this race in the park, for example, but it's not cheap, okay? The other issue is, do you run as a slate, or do you run and try to share resources with other candidates? For example, those other candidates that may have gotten the Democratic endorsement. I mean, there's some advantages and disadvantages to that. Obviously, resource sharing, the money aspect is probably the biggest advantage in that, but it also kind of aligns you with other candidates. And in the park, for example, in the last election in November, we were 2/3 blue. So we have a pretty strong Democratic presence down here. And so there can be some real advantages to running as a slate, but that's a decision you have to think about and you have to talk to the other candidates about. Next, please. Voter data. There's a lot of data out there, and it's helpful at times. It's not always perfect. The use of the VAN for likely voters, for example, Jeff made great use of that 2 years ago when he was running Picasso's and May's campaign. But you don't want to get trapped by it as well, because not all the data is there and it's not always accurate. So you don't want to overlook other opportunities to get to voters. Do not think twice about not knocking every door. You have to target, look at your precincts, look at the turnout, and make some decisions. Look at where your strength is in your get out the vote effort vis-a-vis volunteers. And Shannon's going to talk more about that. If you have an active precinct delegate in your area, try to build off that system. Honestly, not all precinct delegates are as active as they need to be. So get to know who is and who isn't and kind of build accordingly. Ideally, you have some people at the block level. If you have a pretty sophisticated precinct delegate system in a particular precinct, the easiest way to do it is assign blocks to people, and preferably people to the person who lives on that block. That is the strongest kind of outreach you can do. Try to find the opinion leaders in your area. And as over time, hopefully you'll become one of those people yourself. And finally, create a network of email outreach to kind of friend to friend. I know in the elections I've been involved in my old house in Virginia and here, I do constant email outreach to a group of friends, pitching my candidates, and no one's ever said, don't do this. I always do it on a BCC system, so I'm not sharing people's emails unauthorized, but I think it's a good way to reach out and get to people, because you are probably going to be the most tuned in, and your friends actually will appreciate that information. Next, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Thanks, Jeff and Mary. So the last piece of this is your volunteers. And as Mary alluded to and started talking about, your volunteers are going to be one of the most important parts of your campaign. And so right now, if you're planning on running, you want to start thinking about who those key volunteers are going to be. We have networks of volunteers here with the Grosse Pointe Dems. So when we have endorsed candidates, we do what we can to support. But as it's your campaign, no one is going to be more invested and more interested and more committed than you are. So start thinking now about who the people are that can do different kinds of things. So not everybody is the volunteer to knock the doors. Not everybody is the volunteer to be your one of your spokespeople on Facebook or social media. Not every volunteer is going to be great at helping you fundraise. So start thinking about the skills in those different buckets. So the different important buckets of running a campaign, and then be really specific about what those tasks are. So volunteers are going to want to say, your friends, your family, the folks you know in the community, they're going to want to support you. You're going to have to ask, but they're going to want to support you. And when they do, you want to be really ready with the specific things they can do right away. So hitting people up right away with the tasks. If you leave too long between when somebody says, hey, I want to help, then they might move on to something else and get busy with life. Volunteer commitment and engagement is a constant process, and it's going to be one of the most important things you do when running a campaign. You've got to strike when the iron's hot, you have to have the tasks ready, and you have to have that organizational system. Whatever it is you decide to base your system off of, whether, like Mary said, there's a lot of email contact, you might create a specific Facebook page for your volunteers or an email outreach list for your volunteers. But you want to be able to communicate right away and make sure you keep it all organized in a system of who's doing what and what you need done. And also think about that we all have roles as volunteers. So like I said, hopefully everybody on this call, whether you're running for office or not, you think about the different ways that you can plug into local campaigns. In the last election season, we saw people for the first time engaging around knocking doors, engaging around making phone calls and being involved in an election. And local elections provide a really great opportunity for all of us to do that. Instead of having to have contentious conversations on the door about national politics, you're talking about the issues that matter right here on the ground, transparency in your local government, or what's going on with the water systems, or the things that hit people on a really daily basis. And I think that the other big part of volunteers is helping you spread that message. And so once you start thinking about how you're organizing your volunteers, you also have to think about how you're training your volunteers. It could be your best friend in the world, but that doesn't mean that that volunteer knows your campaign stump speech, knows your issues, and knows what you're trying to do to win this election. So you have to make sure that you provide that kind of training on what your message is and on what the tasks are that you want them to do, so that you're sending out people really prepared. And I would also say it's really important to think about volunteers from what they're getting in it for. You want them to come in it because you want to win, right? But they're coming in it because they want to be part of your team, and they want to be part of a movement, a team that has momentum. They want to be part of a team that is connected. They want to be part of a team that feels important. And that's your job. So your job is making sure that you provide that leadership that says, hey, you're joining this really important team. We are going to change this community. This is how we're going to do it, and make sure that that is a constant message. So that can be a message at the start, but how are you making those volunteers feel like they are connected to something bigger than just you throughout the process? So how are you doing that care and feeding? Are you having events? Are you having Zoom meetups? Are you, hopefully, socially distanced in the campaign season, meeting up outside to rally the troops and to create that sense of community? So those are all things that are really, really important. And the more that you can think about how you're going to plan that out starting now, the communication, the care and feeding, the training of volunteers, and the tasks of volunteers, the more you can kind of develop your volunteer plan early on, the more effective and engaging it'll be, and the better chances you're going to have at winning, because nobody can win even a local campaign without a team.
Thank you so much, guys. Jeff, Mary, and Shannon, really, really appreciate it. We do have a few minutes here for questions. I'm going to ask everybody to raise their virtual hand if they have questions. Right now, the first one up I see is Ernestine. Ernestine, go ahead.
Hello, and thank you everyone for providing such a thorough overview, and this was very informative, and thank you so much for your time on a Saturday to give this information. I wanted to ask a little bit about, just having a virtual world that we live in now, and, as more and more of us become vaccinated and things start to slowly go back to normal, what is the advice that you guys would give? And many of you probably campaigned pre-pandemic, but what advice would you give campaigning, during a pandemic, and it's in terms of like reaching more people virtually, and how to encompass that into your field work?
Colton, are you calling on people to answer, or do you want people to jump in?
I was just going to say, whoever wants to take it, go ahead. I saw both Shannon and Jeff unmuted themselves, so go ahead.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, really quickly, first of all, I would not discount the need to knock doors. It can still be effective. It can still be safe. And I'm sure Shannon has probably some more specific ideas on that, and I'll leave that to her. But I would say look for your community groups and forums online, get involved in those, and you can meet people through that. And you can also get a really good understanding of what the key issues in your community are and what people are talking about. We have a community group in Grosse Pointe Park, and it's very, very active. There's anywhere from 10 to 20 posts a day. Everything from nobody picks up after their dog on the street to what's going on with the sidewalks and the DTE work that's lingered on for years.
And just piggyback, thanks, Jeff. I would say too, for sure the knocking doors, we did it safely in the last election season, and there are ways to do it, and that's huge. But also leveraging this new technology where we all learn to come together on Zoom, right? So one of the silver linings is we learn to have these kinds of engaging events. And so I would say trying to leverage that and think about how you can provide both in-person opportunities and virtual opportunities for folks that might not be able to engage in the same way. And think about not only participating in the ones that already exist, but what maybe you can create as far as opportunities for people to come together around your campaign.
If I could jump in and add one other quick point as well, agreeing with what Shannon just said, we found with our city council meetings that we're getting much better attendance because people don't actually have to leave their houses and go to City Hall. They're able to do it from home. They can step away, they can finish dinner, whatever. being able to do that on Zoom is giving everybody a lot more flexibility. So I think in some ways, if you can have those online events, I suspect you would get better turnout than when you're having, at event at a local coffee shop, because people are going to be able to jump in from home, leave early if it's convenient for them. I think there are actually some good potential possibilities there.
Thank you.
And thank you all for answering that question. Any other questions? Again, I suppose you can unmute yourself if you have a question, or raise your virtual hand. I'm not seeing any at the current moment. Going once, going twice.
Hey, Colton, can I ask a question?
Sure, and I did also see Andrea's hand go up as well. Go ahead, Jeff.
Okay, my question is quick. Do we know if any local candidates have ever used ActBlue for financing and donations, and if that's available to Democrats?
I certainly don't know.
Yes, I used it.
Mhm.
Yeah, I will say it require either accepting campaign contributions online requires, there are some hoops you have to jump through, and I'm happy to talk to candidates who want to jump through those hoops, but there are definitely a few challenges.
Okay. Thanks,
Hi,
Nate.
this is Beverly Kendall Walker, and yes, I use ActBlue for when I run partisan and nonpartisan, so it doesn't matter. But there's a procedure and a process to it. But yeah, it's a good system.
Great.
And for those who don't know, ActBlue is the kind of the go-to donation portal for Democrats to be able to take donations online. I'm sure if you've made a campaign contribution to anybody in the last several years, you've probably used ActBlue. It's a very useful tool.
And I would say that as a club, we're going to encourage candidates, and I will definitely be helping candidates get on ActBlue, because one of the other big things it allows us to do is it makes it a heck of a lot easier to work together on fundraising, because you can do kind of joint fundraising appeals that everybody gets a split contribution. It's good stuff.
And it's very easy to use, I've found. Andrea, go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a question in relationship to pursuing the support of a campaign manager or treasurer. Are those positions usually paid positions, or are they, do people work on what is the best practice in terms of, if you don't have a really good friend that you trust that could be, someone that filled those roles, what's best practice for them?
So I'll just say the biggest limiting factor with campaigns is the amount of money that comes in. My race, again, was one of the more expensive ones in the last major election cycle, and certainly the most expensive in Grosse Pointe Farms history. And I raised $8,700. So there's not a lot of money in it for someone to, theoretically you could pay them, but honestly, you're going to want to use your money for other things. So I would really try to find a volunteer that can help you. And the campaign manager position, Jeff, you should talk about that. But I think it kind of depends, it's helpful, but these should not be paid positions. These are volunteer positions.
Yeah, I was not paid, and I think the cost of Neil's campaign was on the high end. I believe that the campaigns in 2019 and in the park, those total campaign budgets were between $3,000 and $4,000 at the most.
I want to kind of, if I may, slightly more directly answer what I think Andrea's question is, which is just more about the positions themselves of treasurer and campaign manager. I don't know if you guys, maybe I missed this, but so treasurer usually would not be a paid thing. That's like if you can find a family member or friend to just keep your books for you, keep an eye on the money coming in and the money going out. It's usually not that big of a time commitment, although the biggest responsibility, again, is keeping track and then filing the paperwork, essentially, filing your campaign finance things when those deadlines come up for campaign finance. Campaign manager, on the other hand, you know, some campaigns, especially local ones, might not ever feel like they need a campaign manager. Depends on the type of race you want to run. Whereas, like, say, a state representative campaign, which is still very localized, you know, they might find a college student who's, you know, interested in politics, and they might be paying that college student $2,000 a month to run the campaign. It really is dependent on how much money the candidate raises and what type of campaign that the candidate wants to run. Sometimes you can find a really skilled campaign manager who just wants to help out and maybe isn't looking necessarily for money, just looking to help you win. And certainly those people are out there as well. But it is very important to find the right people for both of those roles, as they are very, very important to a campaign's success. Harper Woods Mayor Valerie Kindle, I see your hand is up.
Okay, I forgot to mute myself, but I just want to say, although I have been involved in politics for a long time, this was so very helpful to have all the information right in front of you and to be able to reflect on what you need to do, because you can misstep and cause yourself great harm by not knowing, especially if you try to raise money before you even a true candidate. You can also cause yourself great harm. So this was so informative, and I thank you guys so very much for putting it on, and everyone for taking their time out today. It just shows us how powerful our Grosse Pointe Democratic Club is. Thank you, guys.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And I'm not seeing any more questions at the moment. I'll ask one more time. Does anybody have any questions? If not, we can wrap this up and I will conclude. Anybody? Not seeing anybody. Okay. So let me just say in conclusion, thank you for everybody who attended. Thank you to all of our speakers. I really, really appreciate everybody's attendance and participation here today. Actually, let me, I was going to put my, my contact information up here so everybody can have that. So I'm happy to answer any questions anybody has going forward, or if I can help connect folks with some of the speakers or what have you, let me know. There's my contact information. I hope you see that. I intend to put the presentation so everybody can have that handy. I'm going to put that in the Facebook event page. I'm also going to be sort of putting a YouTube video together that I'll also share. That I'm going to have to chop this this recording up a little bit and maybe shorten it a bit, but so that will be available to people as well. I would just say also best of luck to all candidates. Those who know they are running, especially, best of luck to those who are still deciding. Obviously, you know, it's a big decision, and I hope you learned a lot today. That it might not be as easy as you might have thought it was. It's very complex. There's a lot going on, but we certainly hope that today's presentation helped you gather some thoughts and put some strategies together. Please stay in touch with us going forward. I know that I went over the sort of a little bit of the campaign strategy for the Grosse Pointe Democratic Club this year. Please stay in touch with us. We will do our best to stay in touch with you. You better believe that. We're going to be reaching out probably. And so, you know, this is a team effort going forward. The strategy is to put together a comprehensive, you know, package of candidates throughout all the points and Harper Woods so that we can, you know, win some seats here this year. So stay tuned for more to come. And again, just want to say thank you, everybody, for participating and for joining us today. Thank you, everybody. Take care.